Hello, everybody. My name's Renee. This is my channel, and first off, I want to be sharing with you some fairy tales. So, to start with, we're going to be sharing some stories and some songs from out of this book, In Fairyland, with pictures from the Elfworld. It's a beautiful book written by Richard Doyle, first published in 1870. The first story that I'm going to be reading out of this book is Princess Nobody, and I'm dedicating this to my children, Kenzie, Peter, and Reece, and also to any other child that is away from home or far away from their mother right now. So I'll just first show you one of the beautiful illustrations that we have here in this book. It is really gorgeous. Such a wonderful thing to share with your children. So we'll start from the beginning. The Princess Nobody, Chapter 1. Once upon a time, when fairies were much more common than they are now, there lived a king and a queen. Their country was close to Fairyland, and very often the little owls would cross over the border and come into the king's fields and gardens. The girl fairies would swing out of the boughs of the fuchsias and loll on the leaves and drink little drops of dew that fell down the stems. Here you may see some fairies making themselves merry at a picnic on a fuchsia, and an ugly little dwarf climbing up its stalk. Now, the king and queen of the country next to Fairyland were very rich, very fond of each other, but one thing made them unhappy. They had no child, neither boy nor girl, to sit on the throne when they were dead and gone. Often the queen said she wished she had a child, even if it were no bigger than her thumb. She hoped the fairies might hear her and help her, but they never took any notice. One day, when the king had been out counting all his money all day, the day when the tributes were paid in, he grew very tired. He took off his crown and he went into his garden. Then he looked all around his kingdom and he said, I would give it all for a baby. No sooner had the king said this than he heard a little squeaking voice near his foot. You shall have a lovely baby if you give me what I ask. The king looked down, and there was the funniest little dwarf that ever was seen. He had a high red cap like a flower. He had a big moustache and a short beard that curled outwards. His cloak was red like his cap, and his coat was green, and he rode on a green frog. Many people would have been frightened, but the king was used to fairies. You shall have a beautiful baby if you will give me what I ask, said the dwarf again. I will give you anything you like, said the king. Then promise to give me niente, said the dwarf. Certainly, said the king, who had no idea what niente meant. How will you take it? I will take it, said the dwarf, in my own way, on my own day. With that, he set spurs to his frog, which cleared the garden path at one bound, and he was soon lost amongst the flowers. Well, next day, a dreadful war broke out between the ghosts and the giants, and the king had to set forth and fight on the side of his friends, the giants. A long, long time he was away, nearly a year. At last he came back to his own country, and he heard all the church bells ringing merrily. What can be the matter? Said the king, and hurried to his palace, where all the courtiers rushed out and told him the queen has got a baby. A girl or a boy? Said the king. A princess, your majesty. The nurse said with a low curtsy, correcting him. Well, you may fancy how glad the king was, though he would have preferred a boy. What have you called her? He asked. Till your majesty's return. We thought it better not to christen the princess, said the nurse, so we have called her by the Italian name for nothing. Niente. The Princess Niente, your majesty. When the king heard that, and remembered what he had promised to give Niente to the dwarf, he hid his face in his hands and groaned. Nobody knew what he meant. Why was he sad? So he thought it best to keep it to himself. He went and kissed the queen and comforted her and looked at the baby. Never was there a baby so beautiful. She was like a fairy's child, and so light she could sit on a flower and not crush it. She had little wings on her back, and all the birds were fond of her. The peasants and common people, who said they could not see why the first royal baby should be called Ninety, always spoke of her as the Princess Nobody. Only courtiers called her Niente. The water fairy was her godmother, but for a fairy reason, they concealed her real name. And of course she was not christened Niente. Next, you may see her sitting, teaching the little birds to sing. They are all around her in a circle, each of them singing his very best. Great fun she had, all her little companions had with the birds. Here they are, riding on them, tumbling off when the bird cakes. And here she is with all the birds. The baby princess is riding a parrot, while one of her maids of honour teases an owl. Never was there such a happy country, all birds and babies playing together, singing as merry as the day was long. Well, this joyful life went on till the Princess Niente was growing quite a big girl. She was nearly 14. Then one day came a tremendous knock at the palace gates. Out rushed the porter and saw a little dwarf in a red cap and a red cloak, riding a green frog. "Tell the king he is wanted," said the dwarf. The porter carried his rude message, and the king went trembling to the door. "I have come to claim your promise. You give me niente," said the dwarf in a froggy voice. Now the king had spoken long ago about his foolish promise to the queen of the water fairies, a very powerful person, and the godmother of his child. "The dwarf must be one of my people if he rides a frog," the queen of the water fairies had said. "Just send him to me if he's troublesome." The king remembered this when he saw the dwarf, so he put a bold face on it. "That's you, is it?" said the king to the dwarf. "Just go to the queen of the water fairies. She will have a word to say to you." When the dwarf heard that, it was his turn to tremble. He shook his little fist at the king. He half drew his sword. "I'll have niente yet," he said, and he set spurs to his frog and bounded off to see the queen of the water fairies. It was night by the time the dwarf reached the stream where the queen lived, among the long flags and rushes and reeds of the river. Here you see him by the river. How tired his frog looks! He is talking to the water fairy. Well, he and the water fairy had a long talk, and the end of it was that the fairy only found one way of saving the princess. She flew to the king and said, "I can only help you by making the princess vanish clean away. I have a bird here on whose back she can fly away in safety. The dwarf will not get her, but you will never see her again, unless a brave prince can find her where she is hidden and guarded by my water fairies." Then the poor mother and father cried dreadfully, but they saw there was no hope. It was better that the princess should vanish away than that she should be married to a horrid, rude dwarf who rode a frog. So they sent for the princess and kissed her and embraced her and wept over her. And gradually she faded out of their very arms and vanished clean away. She flew away on the bird's back. And that is the end of chapter 1 of The Princess Nobody. I will come back to you with chapter 2 soon.